A swarm of Ukrainian sea drones have sunk yet another Russian warship as news comes through from Europe that 50 billion euros of aid is on its way to Kyiv.
Kyiv again, and this is a scene of yet another. We're in Kyiv again.
My name is Jerome Starkey. I'm the defence editor at the Sun newspaper, and this is the Frontline, your latest roundup of the most important news from the war in Ukraine. We'll start with the news coming through today that a swarm of Ukrainian sea drones have sunk the Ivanovets, a Russian corvette that was in water in the western edge of occupied Crimea. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense released footage which appears to be filmed from one of those sea drones that attacked the vessel from the stern. We understand that a number of these drones may attack the vessel, hit it in the rear, it flooded, fell aft and sank. And that assessment that the boat has been destroyed, the warship has been destroyed, was confirmed this afternoon as well by Western officials. It brings to 21 the number of Russian warships and a submarine that have been damaged, destroyed or sunk over the course of the war over nearly 2 years. A significant victory for Ukraine. And of course it comes as good with more good news today from Brussels. News that at a summit of EU leaders they have managed to overcome resistance from Viktor Orban, the leader of Hungary, to pass a 50 billion euro package of aid that will support Ukraine over the next 4 years. Now, Hungary had objected to that. That money had been held up. And of course, while that money was held up in Brussels, a similar amount of money, some 60 billion US dollars, was held up in Washington by political wrangling there. Interestingly, today, a message from Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, saying that he hopes that seeing what Europe has achieved, congressmen in America may be persuaded, may be encouraged to drop their obstacles and allow their funding to reach Ukraine as well. Of course, that money crucial for Ukraine to remain in the fight. The message coming through today, loud and clear in one of the latest briefings that I was party to with Western officials, is that this is becoming a war of attrition, but that attrition is just as much on the economic front as it is on the battlefield. The point they were keen to stress is that actually the combined economies of Ukraine's allies are some 25 times larger than Russia's economy, and Russia is setting itself on course for real problems, if not collapse, by spending 40% of its annual budget on security and defense. Nonetheless, the real risk for Ukraine remains as before, the resolve of its international allies to keep it in the fight. The message that also came through was that the Western officials I spoke to today do not expect either side to make a significant breakthrough on the battlefield in 2024. So that means we're looking at a sort of elongation of the current stalemate for at least another 12 months, at least based on their current assessments. But that doesn't mean that nothing is happening. In fact, quite the opposite. I mean, since October, they said that they believed that Russia had lost some 365 main battle tanks on the battlefields in Ukraine and around 700 armoured vehicles. So that's just in the last few months. Their latest estimate for Russian losses, both killed and wounded, is 350,000 people. Now, the message seems to be that Russia is managing to replace those people without calling up another mass wave of mobilization or conscription. The sense coming through from these officials that Vladimir Putin does not particularly want the war in Ukraine to become an election issue. Of course, Russians will be going to the polls for something that, for a rubber stamping exercise, effectively to extend Vladimir Putin's tenure in the next month or so, whilst the Kremlin is keeping up its pressure on its generals to keep slogging away on the battlefield. The assessment in Western capitals is that actually Putin doesn't want this war to become an election issue because there is not any particularly good news to share. As ever, thank you very much for your questions. If you do have them, please leave them. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave them in the comments below and we will endeavour to answer them next time. A lot of the questions from last week really focusing around what happened to the Ilyushin 76. That was the Russian transport plane that was shot down by a missile in Belgorod. Ukraine said it had been carrying S-300 missiles, which the Russians were intending to fire from Belgorod into Ukraine, which is why they shot it down. The Russians very quickly countered and said that in fact it was carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war to a planned prisoner swap. All I can really tell you, the only significant update that I've managed to glean is that Western officials do believe that that plane was shot down by a missile fired from Ukrainian territory. So that appears to really confirm what we already thought to be true, was that the plane had been shot down by Ukraine. Whether or not that plane was carrying prisoners of war remains unclear. The mood music when this news broke last week was that certainly something may well have gone wrong. And really what I'm pointing to, whilst there were conflicting claims from within the Ukrainian establishment, the fact was President Zelensky's immediate reaction was to order an investigation rather than to issue a denial, which was what many of his military, at least what the chief of his air force did as that story simmered. That's all for this week. Thank you very much for watching or listening. If you're listening, then please don't forget to subscribe to the Frontline with me, Jerome Starkey, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, then please don't forget to subscribe to The Sun. And if you do have questions, ask them in the comments below, and we'll endeavour to answer them again next week. Thank you very much.